Imagine this. It's the 19th century, and thousands of people are absolutely convinced the world is about to end. They got ready, they waited, and then crickets. Nothing happened. Well, we're going to dive into what happened next. A story all about a crisis of belief that didn't just destroy a movement, but actually reinvented it, all chronicled in the book Early Writings. I mean, that's a terrifying question, right? For any group of believers. What on earth do you do when the one thing you are most certain of is proven publicly spectacularly wrong? For this particular movement, the answer wasn't to just pack up and go home. Nope. It was to re-examine everything. It's a fascinating look at how faith can adapt, even in the face of what seems like total failure. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Our story really kicks off with this electrifying idea that just swept across America. It was called the Great Adventure Awakening, and the whole thing was built around a single, powerful prophecy that promised the end was right around the corner. And at the very heart of this whole thing was a pretty unlikely guy, William Miller. This guy wasn't some highly trained theologian, he was a farmer, and he'd even been a religious skeptic. But after a pretty intense personal crisis, he decided to study the Bible for himself, just going line by line, convinced it held some kind of hidden timeline. So you're probably wondering, how in the world does a farmer pinpoint a date for the end of everything? Well, Miller got laser focused on this 2300-day prophecy in the book of Daniel. He found a starting point way back in 457 BC, and then he cross-referenced it with another prophecy that seemed to correctly predict an event 483 years later. But here's the key. He believed that in prophecy, one day equals 1 year. So 2300 days became 2300 years. And when he did the math, all signs pointed to one specific time, the year 1844. And just like that, 1844 became the year. Now look, this wasn't some fringe idea cooked up in a barn. Miller's calculations were so convincing that hundreds of other ministers got on board, and pretty soon, a massive movement with thousands of believers grew up around this single powerful expectation. What's really wild is that, according to the source material, Miller himself was kind of shocked by what he found. I mean, he wasn't setting out to create some doomsday clock, but the evidence, at least as he saw it, just felt undeniable. It was this conclusion that he just felt he couldn't ignore, no matter how startling it was. So you've got all this hope, all this mathematical certainty, this intense expectation, and it all comes to a head on one single day, October 22nd, 1844. But what was supposed to be a day of absolute glory would become known forever as the Great Disappointment. So picture it. On that day, believers are gathering all across the country. But here's the thing. This wasn't some scene of panic or chaos. The accounts we have describe a really quiet, solemn anticipation. People met up in their homes and churches, just calmly and patiently waiting for the event they had staked their entire lives on. But midnight came, and then it went. The sun rose on October 23rd, and the sky was still empty. And the feeling, wow, it wasn't just disappointment. We're talking profound heartbreak, total confusion. And now, they had to face the ridicule of the entire world. But here's where the story takes a turn. For a small, absolutely devastated group of these believers, this crisis, well, it wasn't the end. In fact, right there in the depths of their disappointment, they were about to find a completely new beginning and a new vision of heaven. The real turning point, and you won't believe this, came the very next morning. There was this farmer, Hiram Edson, walking through his cornfield, just wrestling with what had happened, when he suddenly had a vision. He saw Christ, but not coming to earth. No, instead, he saw Christ moving from one part of a sanctuary to another, up in heaven. And that vision, it sparked this totally radical new idea. See, the prophecy talked about a sanctuary being cleansed. The Millerites had always just assumed that meant the earth. But what if they'd been wrong the whole time? What if the sanctuary was a real place in heaven, and Christ had just started a new, final phase of his work up there? Okay, so this right here was the crucial shift in thinking. The original idea was that Christ was coming back to cleanse the earth, but the new understanding was that the 1844 date marked a change in Christ's work, moving into a new role in this heavenly sanctuary. The timing wasn't wrong, the event was just misunderstood. So you see, the problem wasn't the date after all, it was the destination.
Now, this brand new, kind of radical idea about the heavenly sanctuary, it was about to get a huge confirmation and be expanded on through the visions of a young woman who would become the movement's prophetic voice, Ellen G. White.
You see, Ellen White's visions basically became the key that unlocked all these theological puzzles for this small group of believers. Whenever they'd get stuck trying to figure out the scriptures in this new reality, her experiences would suddenly provide the clarity they felt they were missing.
And the way she described it, it was pretty uncanny. When the group's best thinkers would just hit a wall in their Bible study, she would be taken into a vision and given the answer. What really made them buy into it was her claim that outside of these visions, her mind was just, well, locked. She couldn't grasp these complicated points on her own.
But of course, not everyone was buying it. These supernatural claims were met with some pretty intense skepticism. The most common accusation was that she wasn't having divine visions at all, but was just under the influence of mesmerism, which was a popular kind of hypnosis back then. So, to push back against this, she tells the story of a really dramatic public showdown. She actually challenged a famous mesmerist to try and put her into a trance. According to her, he tried for over half an hour and completely failed, which, for her followers, was all the proof they needed that this was a divine power at work, not some psychological trick. And look, she even wrote about her own doubts. At one point, she actually feared that it was mesmerism and tried to resist a vision. And the response? She was immediately struck dumb, couldn't speak a word until the next day. For her, that was the final, undeniable confirmation that she had to deliver the messages she was getting. All right, so you've got a reinterpreted prophecy, you've got a new prophetic voice. The scattered believers started pulling it all together to forge a brand new faith with a really distinct set of beliefs that would set them apart from everyone else. So literally, from the ashes of the Great Disappointment, a new faith starts to get built on these 5 big pillars. These became the core truths that really defined who they were now: the new understanding of the heavenly sanctuary, the crucial importance of the seventh-day Sabbath, a feeling that they were living in a special time right before the final judgment, the belief that prophecy was back through Ellen White, and the need for a real church structure to protect all these new truths. And beliefs like observing the Sabbath on the 7th day, so Saturday instead of Sunday, well, that became absolutely central to their new identity. As this vision put it, the Sabbath was a separating wall, a clear line on the sand that distinguished this group from all the other Christian churches of the time. So when you really boil it all down, this story from early writings is just a remarkable case study in resilience. It shows how a moment of profound, very public failure was totally transformed, not into an ending, but into this powerful, foundational story of divine guidance. And it really leaves us with this big, compelling question. How does an origin story born from such a deep crisis continue to shape a group's identity, even centuries down the road?